Welcome to the One Cell, One Light radio show audience with Dr. Hildegarde Staninger, commonly known as Dr. Hildy. We have a very special treat for y'all today. Our show is going to be on Transcending the Death Gene. It's going to be done in two parts of actually activating the non-death gene, and then the other half is with the SERT and the telomerase, the secret of longevity. But my special guest, who has pioneered this through a spiritual means and also bonding earth and heaven together, is Mikael King of Divine Joy. He has pioneered and lectured throughout the world and done many different spiritual studies and taught lots of people in opening their heart chakra, and he's going to explain it all. Do we have Mikael there?
Yes, aloha. Aloha, everyone. Aloha, Dr.
Oh, thank you, Hildy. You know me a long time.
Yes.
And
we wanted to come in formally, and then we can get really, really informal.
Okay, great. And Chris from Creations by Chris, who knows you well too, our Amber lady, she says hi.
Yeah, aloha. We say yes to the Amber jewel activation.
Yes.
Very, very much appreciated.
Yes.
Full appreciation for that. Blessings to her.
Thank you. Mikael, can you explain, because I know your background is diverse, and you are solid as a rock in what you do and what you express through your individual clients and group sessions, and also what you do for our planet. And that, but before we go into the Transcending the Death Gene, I think our audience just needs a little basics of where you're coming from, and then go into the Transcending the Death Gene, if you don't mind.
Sure. So, maybe I can start with just what I'm all about.
Yes.
First of all, I started this whole journey a little over 14 years ago, and basically was like everyone else, going into university, was in pre-med, had my whole life mapped out, and then I had a series of experiences that culminated into me actually having a death experience, drowning in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Francisco, and it turned out to be very much a shamanic death experience where I left my body and basically received these messages that if I continued in the way that I had been living up to 20 years at the time, that I would no longer be serving the awakening and activation of this planet and what Mother Earth is doing right now, of course, with all the changes that we're seeing right now in this moment all across the planet, economically, socially, spiritually, environmentally, so on and so forth. 14 and a half years ago, this was all happening for me very quickly, and I was given a choice to either come back and become one that's going to serve as a spiritual warrior to assist the Mother Earth and her children to come to this next step of evolution, or I would be part of the masses of unconsciousness and could leave the body. So it was actually a very deeply life-inducing, you could say, life-affirming experience. It went beyond death.
Right, I would say it would...
There is no death.
Right, I would say it turns your soul inside out in awakening.
Absolutely. And that point was the first time that I actually surrendered to something greater than myself, greater than my ego, my mind, saying this is how life is, this is the way it has to be done, this is my path, I'm going to go into the technical... my whole family is nurses and doctors, half of them are, and so that's kind of my background. So I kind of, even before starting med school and starting all of that, I got awakened way before that, and that led me into basically the last 13, 14 years of my life have been working with different shamans and sound healers and other forms of sort of New Age consciousness from both what we would term the New Age, which is such a broad term, but those who are really dedicated, devoted to a path, in which I was for 3 years with Tibetan Buddhism and had a Rinpoche, was back and forth from the East and the West, to leading that to travel the world to over 30 countries, working with different shamans, sound healers, different people of the path, from the indigenous to the cosmic, and also starting to connect in with my own source consciousness to assist people to come into what I had received and embodied as an activated human cell on Mother Earth Gaia's body and within her body, which is really what I really share at the core, is through divine joy, really assisting people to understand what it means to be a sovereign, enlightened cell being, as we are all cells that are traveling and moving and loving and sleeping and dreaming and figuring out our lives, sorting out our lives on this, third rock from the sun. So, yeah, I mean, that's in a real brief nutshell sort of the path that I've taken up to this point, to now serve humanity and serve this beautiful, amazing planet that we call home.
Right, and what you brought out was a beautiful, not just concept, but a comparison that even though our body is made up of 3 trillion or more cells, we are like an individual cell on this planet. And whether we want to consider ourselves the good cells, the bad cells, the evil cells, or whatever they may be, those energies, those forms of light and sound, and I'm referencing that type of communication because that type of communication is how our cells are triggered and they communicate or they divide within the body. Yes, you need the nutrients, you need all that. That's a given. But it's all a code. It's like the Morse code, but with a little bit of light. And also, with my background in the far infrared, I know that to keep a soul intact or keep that life force within you that is your own configuration, is what you've been ordained with, from the beginning of time or however you are composed, that you need a certain amount of far infrared. Even though we don't see it as a photon, it is a certain vessel that holds this, because if you do not have a certain amount of far infrared to make 2 diphotons go together to make a single photon in your cell for energy, which is using ATP or any of that, you need 15 light photons, like little lights, like little candles. And if you don't have that, you're never going to have energy. If it's blocked, and a lot of things are blocking the aging process because one is contamination, having calcification, meaning there's new papers out now that if you have little molecules, even nanoparticles, it can stimulate the calcium within your body's cell membrane to come out trying to neutralize it, trying to encapsulate it. But then that makes a hard, like a calcified callus, and then you can't absorb the nutrients, etc. Thus, you cannot, audience, absorb the light or the triggering mechanisms of what is needed. In particular, with this, one is opening the body so that you have a good flow of energy, and one is, as we all know, in healthcare and spirituality or anything, live in the now, get rid of all the monkey chatter, which is the emotions, the physical, et cetera, this way. Because even physical diseases, say the top 10 diseases of the world, they all stimulate from an enzymatic process or a triggering of, I'm going to call it mutating or cutting off the nutrients that are needed to stimulate a gene to respond. In particular, with our today's discussion, Transcending the Death Gene, you're going to tell us how to do that, or, how it would be preparing your body for that, versus clinically, they have proven that the death gene does exist, and it's activated with a mutation of the P16 protein that is in our body on certain chromosomes. But meaning if you cut that off, which is usually, as you stated when you were interviewed, like on about age 28, you make a conscious decision or subconscious, and then this gene can be measured at age 50, it starts to deteriorate. And University of North Carolina did big studies with rats on that. But what I find very interesting, Mikael, is that this particular protein, this gene, which is related to P16, also stimulates your carcinogenic tumor antigens to respond. So if you don't have enough of that gene or that mechanism to stimulate it, you could have metastasization of cancer, that way. And audience, bear with me. I'm just trying to paint the picture of the different diseases that are associated with you thinking in your mind that you're going to let this happen, okay?
Yeah.
Because ones who, have that drive and go beyond that do stimulate, which we're going to have on the second half, the longevity gene, because all of us are programmed for survival. Whether you use it or not, that's a different thing. But we do have that, so there is that internal drive. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that they have found, in particular, what we know with the disease called alateral sclerosis, which was Lou Gehrig's disease, it's a more calcified form of multiple sclerosis where you have paralyzation of the muscles, but in this you have the spinal cord and you can't talk, you get paralyzed, it paralyzes the muscles in your lungs. You can't breathe, etc. Number one chemical that does that is malathion and parathion, all of those organophosphate insecticides can chemically induce it. But what they have found is that this protein versus not the gene, Mikael, is that it is called ICE protein, which I find very interesting because it acts like Freon. Mm-hmm. Okay? Yeah. Thus, maybe...
So it freezes it up.
Right, yeah. Freezes it up.
Yeah.
So you don't have that whole internal process, et cetera, this way. But audience, they are making this through genetically modified proteins of using fish and other things to make your ice cream colder, et cetera, this way. So my question is, with many of these new compounds that are being added to foods, which I'm getting a little off the tangent, they may be actual components that may stimulate these genes to cut off so you age prematurely, you die prematurely, when you didn't even have a chance for your conscious reckoning of whether you're going to go beyond 28 or whatever you may be,
Well, that's a great point, because I have to just add to that, and that is at the 28, which is a 7-year cycle times 4, you're getting the 4 directions, you're getting to this point in your life where you're either living at the soul level or you're not. And that's where these things are happening to our foods and to our nutrients, mineral depletion, which isn't off the subject. I think it's actually right on, Hildy.
Oh, okay,
and,
good.
Basically, what I'd like to just say is that at 28, there's a level of the Saturn, which represents the authority in our lives of, are we aligned with the galaxy and the universe? Are we aligned with pure source consciousness? And you find that a lot of our lives, up to that point, many people go through crisis. They go through, wow, I'm actually not living at a soul level. I'm not living at where my dreams and my heart's, in the deep recesses of my heart has been asking me for my entire life, or even as a child, going back to the creative aspects and the exploration, and really the part of us that forms that in the first 7 years that really activates, if we're in a healthy environment, the imaginal cell, the childlike innocence that allows us to go in to this aspect of freedom, and the consciousness that lies within those imaginal cells. Those imaginal cells, which, like, I understand just a tiny bit of all the technical speak, but from more of a metaphysical or more of a spiritual perspective from where I'm coming, I really think of it as an imaginal cell, as a place where even in the subatomic particles, all the way down to the DNA, the gene level, we are living as a universe inside of us. We have trillions of universes inside of us. And so you can look at the microscopic microcosm of what makes up our organs, what makes up our body, and then you can also apply that to the earth, you can apply that to the universe. And the reason I brought up that we are all cells, that we are human cells, because if you look at it as a microcosm just of the planet, and if you just laid out the planet from a sphere and just laid it out as like a flat pancake, you would see that on all the land across the earth, the things that we're creating on the inside, which is the number one disease of the 10 diseases, I would say, especially in the West, and that has infiltrated into the East now because of food processing, because of food as medicine being abused about what we put in our bodies in every moment, that there's actually cancer forming on the earth. And it grows and metastasizes the same way as when we get into the full-blown cancer, whatever organ starts to deteriorate and the epitome of that disease starts to go into the death process. So what is killing us on the inside is also what we're creating on the outside, on the body of the earth that we call our home. So not only are we killing ourselves on the inside in our home inside, but that's also being reflected outside by our very nature to continue to bring and give energy to these cities of the planet that are just polluted, environmentally destroying itself. It's a self-destructive thing. The way that we build our houses, the way that we build our grid, it just knocks down all living organic matter, doesn't care. There's no prayer around it. There's no healthy way to be. In Hawaii here we call Ho'oponopono, to be right with the land, to be right with all relationships, to make right with everything in the universe. And it's our collective unconscious ego, both in our disconnection with source consciousness first, that has proliferated not only into creating these massive diseases, especially cancer, but also the cancerous entities and energies that we construct in our living centers, right?
Right, I'm right with you.
That we completely take for granted as, oh, this is just how it is. And so we have to go here because this is where our batteries are, this is where our energies are, this is how we make money, this is how we survive. We have to be part of the system that receives this kind of food. How else are we going to sustain ourselves and let alone be in survival, but how do we get into survival? How do we thrive? How do we get beyond this? So there's a massive movement towards, and this is all part of transcending the death gene, because there's a point in our lives at 28, and that's what I've received, of course, in many different of my research and my own experience, where there's a part of ourselves that we lose. And in that losing, I believe right now in this moment that there's that freon, there's that ice particle that comes and freezes up the imaginal cell. It freezes up the part of ourselves that all of a sudden we just get on autopilot. We get on autopilot, and then all of a sudden it's a deteriorating, it's a diminishing level return. It's like we go over the hump, and we just start going downhill. Right. And so we find that, and in that, not only is it physically going down the hill, but of course, emotionally, sexually, mentally, psychically, spiritually, all the 6 sheaths of the body, we start to lose our ability to align with who we really are. And then we give in to these programs that are already there, because by the very nature of us choosing to incarnate into an unconscious environment, some of us were born in cities, some of us had no choice, right? At least conscious choice.
Right, because a lot of parents
at a greater level to come into these bodies, to have another human precious life, to have a sacred vessel, and we have to go through these changes to empower ourselves, because basically what it is if you look at it from a soul level, we have given and sacrificed our soul and disempowered ourselves to every level of consciousness. What we eat, what we think, what we do, what we believe in, whether it's our parents, whether it's conditioning from our childhood, whether it's our ancestors from the past that we're still taking on their stuff and playing it out, and then that carries over into our work, what we do with our lives, and that carries over into who we attract into our relationships, then carries into how we sustain ourselves every day with food sustenance and medicine, and then it goes all the way into what is our purpose. So I'm getting a little bit bigger with the scope of this conversation, but everything is connected. We're coming into a time right now where nothing is separate anymore. So any part of your life where you're still in separation, you have a responsibility to the universe to come into union, into every aspect, and take responsibility and empower yourself to stop giving away your power to, the people that have white coats. And that goes from teachers and gurus and on all levels. We're coming to this level where we are being supported now as we move through this universal underworld year here on the 28th, and we're moving through this 11-11-11 gateway. All these energies from a spiritual level are propelling us that all beings, whether in the West or the East or wherever they're living across the planet, have a responsibility to be completely choosing the path of empowerment and to live their lives at the heart level and to completely realize that their greatest wealth is their health. There is no other wealth. Money will never buy what we have inside of us that has been beyond even this particular lifetime.
You said it beautifully, beautifully, because without health, you have nothing. I don't care how much money you got in the bank. I don't care what's going on. You don't have your health, you don't have anything. Yeah. And then that's a whole other story. But the way you placed it, I mean, just looking at Mother Earth, of just looking at her as what is her lungs. I've always been told the trees on this earth are her lungs, just like in the bronchial. Just like we know that you eat grapes for good lung health because it looks like the alveoli or a cluster of grapes looks like it. A lot of symbolism in the shapes of fruits and vegetables for what is medicinally or healthy, beneficial to your body. But we could say, okay, it was this pesticide, it was this type of antifungal thing wiped out this species of trees, or it could be selective genetic manipulation to get it out, because they're non-endemic, meaning they've only lived 500 years in a state, and thus they're not 1,000 years old, so they have to die. The thing is that in any of it, it's not showing respect to that, I'm going to say it's the plant, that life of itself. And at the same time, it's just like you said, many times in the past, or even, I'm going to say our grandparents, or even maybe our parents, when they bought a home or they bought property to live or to do, they would say a prayer of thanks and make that reverence, or pick out a land, and they used to use dowsers to make sure that they had the right grid lines, etc. In doing it. So everything that you've said is exactly what is on target, but what you're doing is taking that bridge from earth to heaven, but using the human cell as the bridge, which is the final bridge.
Absolutely, because the cell contains everything that is made in the universe, and we're made of universe. So, and that's really the key point in transcending the death gene. That whole concept of the death gene for me came about over 10 years ago when I actually read a phenomenal piece of work. It's hilarious. It's great. It's spot on. It's actually one of the Transcending the Death Gene is one of the 9 deadly venoms, and the book is actually called The 9 Deadly Venoms. It's by an author named Alex Gordon, so I'm giving him a whole shout out. And he wrote this book after having this whole experience with the goddess Lilith, who was the rebel goddess before Eve.
Right, the first wife of Adam.
That's right. She got kicked out because she wouldn't listen to Adam, and Adam didn't like her, and so he wanted a much more subservient and docile, partner. So Eve was right there with him. So Lilith is the one that was the rebel. So he ended up channeling this book and wrote some amazing, amazing material. It's a riot. And one of the things that was proposed as one of the venoms was Transcending the Death Gene. And according to Lilith, this was created as part of a fail-safe mechanism to control the human population so that they could finally realize that age and aging and disease were part of their normal upbringing when they chose to incarnate into the human body. And that the falsity of that is that it all has to do with this concept that with the universe, with the billions of galaxies in the universe, with the billions of worlds and star systems in just our one Milky Way galaxy, that everything, all the way down to our solar system, down, of course, to planet Earth, and all of us cells on planet Earth, that right now we're all spinning. And for the longest time, we were one with that spin. We were one with the spiral. We were one with the Fibonacci sequence. And what has happened is that this death gene is activated because all of a sudden we freeze that spin. We freeze that spin within our cells at the cellular, microscopic cellular level. And the fact is then we start to believe that we age, okay? The very concept of aging, meaning numbers, meaning, okay, well, the human lifespan, it's indoctrinated that really if you lived 100, you're doing amazing. That's like beyond amazing, 100 years old, right? So we start
That's the average age in my family.
Counting these numbers, right? We're counting these numbers, and we celebrate these numbers every year all across the planet. Everyone does it. Doesn't matter the culture, the creed, the belief system, the religion. Nothing separates age and death. We're all one with this, right? But the concept she really presents to itself, which I have really taken in and received and done my own research and done my own meditation with it, is that it's a total false concept that age creates a deterioration of your life in your body. And that very concept is a fail-safe program that was created so that we could start to live our lives out of eternity, out of being eternal. So I say this because if we look at spin, if we look at the concept of spin, we look at the Earth and all the planets spinning around our sun Helios, our local sun Helios, right? Mm-hmm. Where if you look at it logically, when we start to turn around the Earth and we're cells, individual human cells on the Earth, spinning on the Earth as it spins around, right? Where does spin create age? How can we literally say, okay, well, we're getting older because we're spinning faster? In fact, it's the opposite. We're getting younger, and right now, as we're going through this massive shift right now all across the planet, all across the solar system, with the galaxy and the universe, we're actually spinning faster, closer to source consciousness. We're getting closer to our sun. Our sun is expanding right now. That's why there's all these solar flares, there's all these solar storms. That's why we're having so much disruption in our technology, because it can't take in that much infinite light. And so infinite light is infiltrating the cells of the human cells on Mother Earth, all our individual cells and the cells of Mother Earth, because there's an expansion of light happening right now. So the concept of age is an illusion. And I didn't find this out more clearly than when about 3.5 years ago, actually almost 4 years ago, I went to Russia, and I had a whole journey there for 2 months, following the whole eco-village Anastasia phenomenon with over 20 million readers. It's all underground. There's over 350 eco-villages, tens of thousands of people living in the cities, getting out of the cancer of the cities and moving into these new eco-villages based on different geometries, based on the spiral, based on different formulations, them all using their imaginal cells. There was one group of beings of 5 to about 18-year-old children, students, who decided to build their own university out of scratch, under the tutelage of a visionary. And every time I'd come up to them and sit with them, and then the first thing I asked, like, someone who looks like they're 6 years old, I'd ask them in their eye, I'd say, how old are you? This is phenomenal what you guys are doing here. Just want to know, how old are you? Every single one would say, I am eternal. There is no age.
I love that.
I am eternal. So right away, their programming is right away. I'm looking at bedrock belief system here. That's
without the
Flintstones. To go to the root of the issue. Like, how do we get to the root of the issue to pull out the whole tree of separation, the whole tree of ignorance? Because most of us are trying to look at it allopathically, scientifically, with our minds, how to deal with the leaves of the tree, deal with limbs. Then we get into the trunk. Let's go to the root, and let's pull the whole thing out so everything else can domino, right? So at the root of the tree, we're looking at the death. We're looking at the thing that unites us all. We're looking at the thing that we're most afraid of, right? And the fact is, that very thing is a complete illusion. It's been programmed ever since we have even been able to communicate at a mass level and infiltrate the system of collective belief system, that we age, that we have an age, that we're actually getting older, and that means automatically hair begins to recede, grayness starts to happen, wrinkles start to happen. All these concepts happen because we're not going to the root of the tree. We've gone to the trunk, we've gone to maybe the first part of the root system, but we're not looking at the essential issue here. Everything begins with a seed of consciousness. Everything in the universe begins with a seed of creation. So what I really, and this has been a huge topic for me on my own personal path. So what I'm really opening up the dialogue is for people to really look and review and reflect at this time, this incredibly amazing time we're living in, is where are these concepts coming from, and who taught us these concepts? And where have we allowed and disempowered ourselves by allowing ourselves to believe in these concepts? And there are generations right now, especially the youth, very quietly, very under the radar, saying, no more. We are not going to be a part of this system that continues to proliferate the illusion of separation, the illusion of death, which is exactly what the masters who walked in many different religions, from Christ in the Sea of Galilee to Buddha to Muhammad, to all the religions, to all the ones that have formed at this point, this is what they were preaching at the very core of the essential, is that there is no death. There is no death. So this gene that has been activated is propelling us to all these things as we go, further out of the body, as we go from the physical to the emotional to the sexual to the mental, psychic, spirit. It's infiltrated to the core of our being. And so this is what we really have to look at. And this is, spin creates the motion that's eternal. Motion never, this is basic physics. Motion does not create separation. Motion actually enhances greater spin.
Right.
So the concept of us spinning around the Earth, being on the Earth as it spins around the sun, it's not getting older, it's actually getting younger. But we've taught ourselves that every time our Earth and being on the Earth creates this year, and this is the whole concept of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that whole concept of time is now gone. The concept of time is gone, which contributes, it's like one other layer to the seed core of the death gene, because the time and the concept of time directly reflates with the aging process, because we believed in time. There's 24 hours in a day. There's 7 days in a week. There's, average of 28 days in a month. There's 365 days in a year, right?
Right.
But this whole concept is dead. We already chose to live in death when we chose to live in time.
Right, and when you... Go ahead.
Yeah. And so basically what I'm trying to get at, and just bear with me, is that we, all of us, it doesn't matter what storefront we have. I like to call it storefront because it's like, okay, yes, you're a doctor. Yes, this is, you're an actor. Yes, you're a shaman. Yes, you're a a bricklayer. Yes, you're a gasoline station worker. Yes, you're whatever it is. We all have this one thing that unites us across the planet. And this is the thing that's dying. Time is dying because the universe and its relationship to Mother Earth and the galaxy and the solar system is saying, hey, guys, these concepts are dead. They've been dead for a long time. It's just you guys have been living in the dead atmosphere of time. And now we have this incredible opportunity. We have the backing of all things in the universe, all the stars in the sky, to come back into alignment with realizing that we are eternal. We are absolutely eternal. And from that, we can start to look at how to address these and unlearn these programs and patterns and issues that we have been force-fed and that we have been taught time and time again, ancestrally, socially, from the government. And we can blame, yes, we can blame, but that's not going to take our power back. That's actually going to waste our time. What we need to do is realize that time is now, and that when we take our power back in the now, we can start to unlearn these patterns and programs and transcend the death gene. Okay, and then we can heal, and we can process, and then we can go into what is it that my soul star connecting with universal source consciousness desires to live in every moment as. And then everything becomes an inspiration. Everything, all your imaginal cells start to go online. Then there's no more ice, there's no more freon, because all that stuff gets thawed out, because you can transcend all of that. We have the power within the spin that's been here since time began, right?
Right.
It's waited very patiently through all time to get to this moment. That we have this power to transcend everything that has been convincing us and begging us and seducing us and manipulating us to sacrifice ourselves, to martyr ourselves, to save, fix, and change ourselves when all of that is an illusion. So,
and that's a big illusion because we know that I know from any chemical exposures or anything, even if you like injected biofillers in you to get rid of your wrinkles and that, it still has no life force. So you're not adding to the life. You're taking away or impeding it. And everything that you said, even down to the spin, as you spin and time moves forward, time is in love with eternity, but at the same time, they want to create the eternalness of everything so it can go on beyond. And if you have that within your heart, you can see it happen to you daily. I know I've experienced that. Everybody's always trying to guess my age. And my business partner always says, don't give them your age. But I go, I look great for 105,
Yeah. I mean, I just, people ask me, I go, I'm eternal, but I'm working on 860 right now.
Right, you got it. You just set your goal. You can change that goal anytime. Exactly. And, some people, some of your viewers may find this really far-fetched, but it's really not. When you it isn't.
Go into it logically and you really look at, wow, is this a belief system that I have fully just completely given my whole concept of intelligence to, and how that seed has just completely infiltrated every aspect of my life, and how it completely has, I've chosen to be manipulated by myself.
Right.
I believe in this, and it's completely domino to every aspect of my life.
Right. And you stated it perfectly, Mikael, that the thing is, you bought in, when you do this, you buy into whatever that program is. You buy into that system, You buy into it, but it's basically what you said. Enough is enough, and it's no more. Because if even like my book or anything, even things that you've written and everything, one is to transcend what was the past of your ancestors. Every one of your ancestors strived to come forward so it can go forward. But you cannot go forward yourself if you're always living in the past.
Exactly.
You can't make room for the now, how can you even dream of the future or make something happen with the desire within your heart and your consciousness connecting to the universal consciousness that you can put a spin on and make things manifest? You have the ability to do that. Every one of us does. But it's what you believe internally within your heart that triggers your computer, your brain, to manifest this stuff. And yes, there can be stuff with sending, as I call it, from the bad people, that can, change your thoughts and everything. That's a whole other science topic. But the thing is, we're talking on just the essence of the human cell, meaning your whole body, and its comparison to the universe. As my friend Rick DeBove always mentions, and as a Taoist, where you hear your frequency, your essence here is the same, and I'm going to prove it sometime in my life, the same frequency of your star that is out there in the universe. It's like I always say, I come from the Cat's Eye Nebula because I got 9 lives, Yeah. But and it does exist, the Cat's Eye Nebula. But it's like you said, and I've always said to my patients, to colleagues, professionally, peers, any of this thing, just look at the example of an egg. You crack an egg open. What does it look like? A universe, a sun and the universe. You look at your own individual cell. It's got a nucleus. It's like the sun. It's like a universe. And you put it so beautifully in connecting every one of those cells into different parts of the universes in the galaxy, which I know in chemical compositions and that you can match up. I've taken stuff that proved that they didn't match Mars, meteorites, but through those elements. And we all have it. It's a simple thing like this. This aging process with the gene, with that P16, it's triggered by the amount of superoxide dismutase. People go, there's only one superoxide dismutase. There's at least 6 different types. They only change by their metal. Example, like iron, copper, nickel, selenium, etc. But the thing is, where they get the iron is usually from the bacteria you eat or the vegetables that you eat that have good roots, like nitrogen-fixing bacteria that absorb into the roots, like what are some root plants, like potatoes, but in particular sweet potatoes, because they've got a lot of this nutrient in it. And the thing is, as you eat these, you tend to get more nutrient because you're replacing what is being lost, even if your subconscious doesn't realize it. But if you immediately take a thought and say, that's not working, hey, you just told yourself to shut down.
Exactly.
And if you keep doing that, it's like, I'll use a joke my dad used to use, your mind is like a sieve, meaning, all the knowledge is just going through a strainer, Yeah. But if you believe that, hey, I wouldn't be who I was. But I go, who told you that? You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter. The thing is, they're funny jokes now. But the thing is, you have to take, many people that have accomplished or pioneered in their life as the human cell, they have taken the controversial of everything on this planet, or the humility, everything, but they ended up being right. Mm-hmm. And this is what you're doing, is giving a divine truth, speaking to the world. We're really on the ethers. And prior to the show, audience, Mikael mentioned to me that he saw 3 rainbows, and probably be a 4th one, so it would be the 4 directions the time we get done with this show.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
And line it all up, because we're aligning the bridge. He's making
we're aligning the rainbow bridge here from
you got it. And
Hawaii.
And my best summer movie was Thor with the rainbow bridge. So you got it. I can see it in my mind now. But the thing is, you have to believe within yourself. You have to go and believe, yes, whatever your directions of your parents are or your grandparents, they're trying to teach you right from wrong, okay, and make it easier than what they had. But being in certain areas is not necessarily the best thing for what you've committed to for I'm going to say it, your soul life or for your expansion. And when you keep getting, I've had in business and that where, you keep getting these same lessons. What's that teaching you is go beyond that, get out of that, break up the pattern, Break
up the pattern. And you know what? To transcend the death gene, we have to celebrate life. We have to celebrate eternal life. We have to celebrate death and the concept of death and life and birth and life and death and rebirth, because all of it is just cycles within cycles and cycles. And if we can fully be here present in the now and celebrate our death as much as we celebrate life, then there's nothing that can take away what is right now, that we know who we are, that we know who we are. Every day I'm celebrating death. I'd like to focus for a moment just on some solutions here for people really quickly. But, learning to connect very simply with how to connect with the sun. The sun is spinning. Galaxies spin. That's how they form. The solar system spins within the galaxy. Do you think the Earth's not spinning? Of course. It's constantly in motion. So the part of us that freezes and is not in motion is the part of us that all of a sudden, on an unconscious, subconscious level, wants to die. So if we want to die, then go all the way down that road already and start to die today. Celebrate your death today. Use your imaginal selves to figure out what it is if you die today. Then tomorrow you're born again. Would you do it over? How would you do it? What would it be like? Look at the sun. Sun gazing. That's a concept that's age-old. Many ancient civilizations that, like one of your recent shows I was watching about the pyramids and different ancient golden age civilizations, all these civilizations. I just came from Peru and Bolivia and Lake Titicaca and the Inca people, and so right now it's like they're all sun worshippers. And here we are afraid of the sun. We have umbrellas that shield from the sun. We got to have sunblock. Everyone wears sunglasses because we don't want to look at the sun. The fact is you don't want to look at the sun because you're afraid, like you said earlier, about ultraviolet rays. The fact is we need those violet rays.
Right.
We need those rays. And the more that we can break down the fears, this is one of the last empowerments I got from my Tibetan Rinpoche many years ago, was to break all my fears with relating and sun gazing directly to our local sun Helios. And I had to break through all my patterns of I need sunglasses. Oh, my retinas are going to burn. Oh, I need sunscreen. I need all these things. I can't look at the sun. The doctor said I can't do this. My parents said I can't do this. The fact is we can have a direct link to the sun beyond our sun, to the universe through the sun. It gives us incredible energy. It helps us to spin those disconnected parts within our subcellular network so that we can start working with the subatomic particles and bringing infinite light and eternal light into our cellular mainframe and start to activate the spin, start to dissolve this ice particle that has locked in, this cycle where we start deteriorating, then you can go right into the body. Like, okay, how come we are not teaching at the very basic fundamentals in school, education, the art of the cleanse, purifying the body, cleansing the body, assisting the body to detox, because our body is the most intelligent thing in the universe. We have created these vessels and chosen to have a certain amount of time and experience in this physical temple, this amazing human being vessel, but we abuse it, okay? The thing is, I like to give this analogy. I'm right now doing a 30-day cleanse. I'm in the middle of a 30-day cleanse, going through all my organs, starting with the colon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is that this is something that is preventative. This is something that assists people to not only get into the spin, to get into the circle, to get into a different geometry than just the square box that's all around our lives at all times, which is part of the reason it's creating disease, and that's a whole other concept, looking at geometry and its effect on consciousness in our daily lives. But not to go off on a quick tangent, I just want to reiterate that one of the things in which we can step into our greatest wealth, which is our radiant health, is that we start to be in the art of the cleanse, the detox, and purification. And the best way to do that and I liken this to, hey, look, if you have a Lamborghini, a brand new Lamborghini Countach, or you have a Toyota Prius, if you don't change the oil in the filter every 3,000 to 5,000 miles, what happens to your vehicle?
Freezes up.
Now think about this. If you didn't change your oil and filter for 20 years, what would happen to the vehicle? I don't care if you have the most beautiful, amazing 0 to 60 in, 5 seconds, or you've got a Yugo. I mean, the fact is, you're not going to have a vehicle to drive. You're not going to have a vehicle to take you where you need to go every day, to get to work, to do what you need to do. It's the same thing with the human vessel, except some people, and I guarantee you probably at least 70% or 75% of the viewers online right now or listening to this call, they have not even done a colon cleanse. Okay? Yeah. That's oil and filter for the body. Oil and filter, and that's a big killer in the West is, colon cancer, right?
Right.
So then you got to look at, okay, that's the organ, that's the sewage system of my body, and I haven't even given it a break. I haven't even said, hey, listen, I'm going to love you up. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to help you just to clean out all the mucoid plaque, all the fats and deposits and things that have clogged up since I was a kid, right? Whether people eat fast food, at whatever level of conscious they're at right now, however old they are, 30, 40, 50, 60, this still can be done. And that's why the basis of many of our allergies, many of our diseases, they start to form because of the colon, because all the gunk that's just, lined up in the 4 or 5 foot colon, right?
Right.
We got to look at, okay, what if you didn't change transmission fluid in the car? All right, what if you didn't change your radiator fluid after 10 years, after driving 60,000 miles, right? You'd blow up. Well, it's the same thing. Let's look at the liver, gallbladder. Let's look at all these things, all the way back to the lungs, the blood, the lymphs, everything, the circulatory system, the nervous system. All these things are affected because we don't take time out. We don't look at how can we go into more yin aspect of consciousness to allow the action in the doing self to be in the being self, the human being, right, because that's who we are, so that we can be human beings, right, so we can really shine in being. We have to start to take ourselves into the internal mechanic and take ourselves into the shop, go on retreat, and start to cleanse out the body. And I can guarantee you, many of your listeners, that this is a huge part of transcending the death gene. If you want to live forever, you have to be in balance. You have to live in balance. And if you're not living in balance and you're just, and that's how the grid is, right? Every city across the planet, human doings are just doing until something comes in, that's some heavy disease, right, that stops the doing. And sometimes it happens with a car accident. Sometimes it happens with, a triple bypass heart attack. Sometimes the list goes on, right? And it's happening all across the planet right now. People are passing on because they're getting this thing and they haven't done the internal mechanic work to transcend their own death genes, right? So whether or not you're at 28 or whether you're older, it doesn't matter. You can still transcend the death gene. And honestly, then we go beyond on death, because the concept of death is an illusion as well. Your soul is eternal. It's part of the absolute. There's no separation there. So when we go into, I know some of these concepts might be quite expanded for some people, but it's essentially incredibly important right now for people to understand that we have this golden opportunity right now in this moment to make conscious, co-creative, imaginal cell change right now. And our body has just been waiting. It's just been the intelligence of all of our bodies, but especially this physical, incredible machine that we call our current life in this vessel. It has just been waiting. It has been twiddling its thumbs, waiting for you to get this concept at its core and make some seriously joyful change. Because that's really what it's about, because then we're more happy, we're more consistent with our happiness, we're more consistent with how we feel. Okay, when we start to go into the internal mechanic, The outer body changes. There's more light in our cells. Our skin tone changes. Our hair grows back. All these things can start to regenerate. Our cells can start to regenerate because that ice that freezes everything up that you were talking about earlier is thawed out. Okay, then we have spring green. We've got things spinning again. I mean, think about all the planets. How do they grow? They grow from the nutrients, the water, but the sun and the rotation of the planet. Look at broccoli. Look at pine cones. Look at all. They're all spinning. They're all spinning at all times, of course, with water, with sun, with nutrients. These are all essential components.
Right, the elements.
Everything is spinning. So this is really important, and I just needed to say yes to solutions.
Yes, because and you're 100% right. It is so important. If you don't clean it out, meaning our grandmothers here used to, give you spring tonics, cod liver oil, et cetera, this way, or you do a cleanse semi-annually or quarterly, being, with the change of the seasons, but people don't do that now. And it could be also, too, is where they used to use, like, dandelion salads and stuff like that to help cleanse out the body so that you can purge these mucoplaques. And now we have a whole society that they got mucus problems, choking on their saliva, everything. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And these things are so simple, and yet people then all of a sudden get gallstones and they got to remove the gallbladder. They get kidney stones, they got to remove the kidney. They've got. I mean, this is so primitive. The whole medical institution, and there's no judgment here because that's just what has been created, but it's so primitive. Okay, we have these basic, simple things that have been given to us, that have been passed down for thousands of generations in every indigenous culture, every culture that's one with the earth. They're so healthy looking and so happy. Why? Well, because they're cleansing and purifying the body. They're fasting. They're realizing that the foods that they're eating, are whole. It is whole, but they're also needing to purify and cleanse the body. And in the West, it's even more so because we don't even, God knows what they're putting in the food these days. I mean, it's just
I don't think he or she knows. He just is in shock that, oh my, I meant all good out of my heart, and boy, were they really creative, those humans,
It's all based on,
and the more they have
a large buck. A lot of money goes into, and really, I tell people, especially my clients when they come to work with me, if you want to continue going to the white coats in the institution, you're going to prison to die. Yeah. You're going to have a elongated death. They're going to give you all kinds of stuff, and this is for the most part. I'm not saying that allopathic medicine is bad. I'm just saying for the most part, we give our power away. What happens when we give our power away? Then we have things cut out of us, we have things removed, we have to go through this process where all along if we took our power back and looked at, okay, this is not going to work for me, I got to change. And it's better to change now when you're remotely healthy than change when things are not looking good, because sometimes that's too late. I mean, there's countless stories and testimonies of people having cancer and people having life-threatening diseases, and doctors saying you got 2 weeks to live or 1 year to live, and people saying, no, I'm taking my power back. I don't believe you.
Right. And
so this is what needs to happen now for everyone. Just like people are telling people right now, take your money out of the banks and put them into federal credit unions, right? Written money. Well, the same thing is take your life force out of the medical institutions and start putting it into the inner mechanic. Start working with people like myself. There are many others that are part of this group consciousness that are facilitating people to take their power back, take the vitality and the energy and the thriving aspects that we can start to live at all times consistently when we start looking and going on retreat and purifying, cleansing, and detox the body. The happiness, the joy, the harmony, the peace, all of this is part of transcending the death gene. It just naturally occurs when we start taking out this root of separation within our body.
Right, and I want you to tell the audience how to get in touch with you and also your website because I hear the music in the background, so we'll be going
Sure.
To the second hour?
Yeah, it's my website is divinejoy.org, DIVINE joy, JOY.org. And you can email me at info@divinejoy.org. And check out the website. And there's also another, my documentary film, New Earth Destiny, which is all about the Russian eco-villages and the Anastasia movement and the kids who built their school out of scratch. That's coming out, and we're launching the website in the next couple of weeks. That's going to be newearthdestinymovie.com. newearthdestinymovie.com.
And
done by Mikael King.
And I want to thank you for being on my show, and I loved it. Okay?
It was so much fun, Hildy. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Mahalo, malamaku aloha to all of you. Blessings.
Bye-bye.
Okay, aloha.
Aloha.
Informed, enlightened, alive and amplified. This is the Living Light Network.
Welcome back, audience, to the second half of One Cell, One Light radio. And we just had on our first hour a very invigorating discussion of Transcending the Death Gene with Mikael King of Divine Joy. And it was wonderful. It confirmed everything that my friend and colleague Rick DeBove has always been saying about the star on earth and the star in the heavens. And on this second half, we're going to go specifically more, I'm going to say, into the science side, because now we have to make the bridge between the spiritual, metaphysical into the physical, which is involving the secrets of longevity and the Sadhguru gene and telomerase. I have on the show with me Michael Edward and also Rick DeBove. Are y'all there, gentlemen?
Hello, Hildy. It's Rick.
Hi, Rick.
Hello,
Mike
Hildy.
will probably... Is Mike there, too? But doesn't matter. He'll join us when he can.
Yeah.
I don't know if you got to hear the first half. It was wonderful. It was just positive of everything that we've always shared in our scholarly club and conversation. So I myself, I'm gonna beat Mikael in his life. I think he said he was going to stay to be 871 or 836, and we should say. For our question for this show, so that we can have a winner, because last show, before we begin in our topic, we had the pyramids of Mesoamerica, and the winner was Suzanne from New Smyrna Beach, Florida, who's an artist, and she won the gift and loves it. She's going to enjoy the video, The Kings of the Sun, with Yul Brynner and George Shakaris. But I'm going to have our question for this show, because it's all involved in longevity, but there was a certain spin that Mikael mentioned, and he specifically gave the name, which is the name of our sun in the universe. So in honor of our sun in the special day of 11/9 and opening the gateway and seeing 4 rainbows that made 3 rainbows, we're making a 4th one from Hawaii that makes our rainbow bridge, because remember, I like that summer movie Thor, okay, which has got to be a definite contest.
Yeah.
But in this, we're going to have our longevity stuff, which is from the village of Bassano Romano, Napolitano, Grand Master, and Matsawapi, representing the East and the West, or I should say the Old World and the New World. And the movie, which I know you and I have seen it a long time ago, and many of our viewers may have been, Lost Horizon, because it talks about people living forever in there with Jane Wyatt and Ronald Colman. It might be an older movie, but it's a wonderful movie, and the whole family will enjoy it. So good luck to the winner. So the question is, what is the name of our sun, okay? S-U-N, not S-O-N, okay? And
right.
Rick, I appreciate you being on with me, because it's good to have somebody to talk to as we're going through these things. I have made a number of discussions for our audience. In the first half, we did bring out the science side of, there's a gene called P16 that stimulates certain enzymes to come out so that you start to initiate, I'm going to say, a death sequence, which is in particular with, there's a marker. It's called the senescence, SENCENSEAE of the gene, okay? So when that gets stimulated, it freezes up. It literally makes a protein that they call ICE, ICE. And in doing that, you start the aging process, whether it's from a tumor, and getting metastasized, the physical conditions of whatever the disease is, okay? And I'm a strong believer in physician heal thyself, meaning if you can't do it, you got to get through it. And the thing is, where I'm going with this is that there's a lot of talk on different nutrients, different formulations. There's beautiful products, and they range in cost from, and I'm talking natural products, audience, not, like going and getting injection or facelifts or any of that, okay? I'm talking about natural natural foods or nutrients isolated from those foods so that then it stimulates your cells of the nutrients. But it all goes back to what Mikael said. If you buy into the thought that you're going to go, you're going to go. How is it going to work? I mean, how many people go in front of a mirror, Rick, and say, hey, all 3 trillion or plus cells of you, you look absolutely gorgeous today, No one does except me.
I know.
Yeah.
I want to interject something here.
Sure.
This talk about DNA and genetics. Obviously it's a real thing. But what I'm a little bit bothered by is that this it's become like a current form of parlance in the scientific community about junk DNA. Well, I am just intuitively saying it's there. Why does that make it junk? In other words, it must have substance. It must refer to something else. In other words, junk makes it sound like, well, it's just meaningless. It's a throwaway. So I'm just wondering about that,
Right. And I appreciate you bringing that up because my partner Roberto and I, as you well know, we're all partners in different things and different projects. We concentrated our efforts in creating that because it all stimulates, meaning the study of junk DNA. It's like integrative health systems. If you have a lot of junk DNA, let's go study it, and we'll prove, if you come from another planet or whatever, because what is Dr. Hildy good at is finding it, So definitely, because I've seen titers, and just using this as an example, audience, of someone having a titer of, say, 1,000 for Basque in an area of Spain. And the thing is, another person having 136,000 titer, where the other person, the highest titer was 1,000. So how does that comparison? And the DNA lab that we used, they said, well, the rest was junk DNA. So that meant that the other person that had the 1,000 titer for Basque had so much other junk DNA, which means that the geneticists or that don't know what it does.
Yeah,
because it doesn't compare. It doesn't compare to the genome, quote unquote, of human genome of all the animals, the life forms as we know it. Okay.
Well, I think and I do think on the part of these geneticists, I think it's a cop out to say it. Well, it's saying junk DNA means they have not really looked into it as deeply as they could.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, everything is there for a purpose. And it has a position. Now, it may be historical DNA, meaning it is a remnant or vestigial element of, and again, I go back to our friend Joseph Farrell's work that, there once was, you can forget about, little gray people or green people. There once was an interplanetary civilization. And which very likely were human or something very close to us. So maybe it's a holdover from that. but I would say definitely to dismiss it as junk. I don't like the word, frankly.
Right. Well,
it's there. It must be there. It may refer to a genetic past, or it may bridge a genetic past with a genetic present. So that it's purely a subjective reaction on my part, but I hope it adds something to the discussion.
Right, which it does, and we collectively, or you have to come up with a good name that we can reference it and start doing some papers on it. But instead of calling it junk. But I will say, out of junk and some other choice words, you can create a lot of good stuff, like fertilizer. But
yeah, called manure.
Hey, I'm creative over here.
Hi, Hildy.
Hi, Mike. Hi. We were talking about the junk DNA, but I personally feel that as our science progresses in what we're doing here as a company, it will show the link as not only is the junk DNA being part of something that is universal, I'm going to say beyond this planet, okay? It will also show of what, I'm going to say, generational poisons that you were exposed to, because with even like if you used arsenic as an example, we know that it causes skin melanoma when you get exposed to the sun, etc., but we have it so much in our food now, and they're given as miticides in chickens, and everyone's eating chicken, all this type of thing. It accumulates and it deposits in the skin. What I'm saying is that I know that as you get exposed to toxins or venoms or anything, you have that survival gene and the longevity gene. It will overlap and cause you to create a protein so that you don't die from the toxin or the poison, but it will make possibly a plaque or any of these other types of parameters that would be looked at to measure and be part of that chemical composition. Or I shouldn't say that fingerprinting of those genes, that type thing. And I know this is right on the cusp. It will be developed. And also with any type of gene therapy and everything, they're trying to repair this gene and that, but they don't, I feel that a lot don't realize from the spiritual side of how, yes, you can show that the DNA folds and it compresses and it does this, but it has memories in it within the water within its system, and I think it's going to go back to what you said in other shows, Rick. Going back to those somatids. That's going to be a goal for our company in 2012, that we concentrate on that and look at the somatids in different plants, et cetera, this way, because it's all part of the life. It's the particle of God within yourself and matching it to who you are.
In this, and by the way, hello, Michael.
Hi, Rick.
Nice that you're here.
It's been one of those days where everything got behind schedule, but hey, the show is on. That's all that matters.
There you go.
Right, and we're creating a fourth rainbow. We're going to help Mikael create the fourth rainbow.
Let me break in real quick because
sure.
When I came on here, Mikael had called back in, and I know he had some appointments, but we had the most people in the chat room here live that we've ever had on any show on this first hour. So by popular demand, Hildy, would you like to have Mikael join us here on this? Definitely, if he's available. I didn't know how his time was, definitely. And I know the audience will enjoy it. Oh, absolutely, and so will I. He had some appointments, and he wasn't too sure if he could arrange things, but I see he's back on now. So let me check to see if he'll have some time with us, and you guys just keep going, and we'll come in as we're available.
Yes, and audience, I want to share so that we can expand on this topic. The topic is the longevity gene. The longevity gene in the mammals and humans in particular has been identified as SIRT1. In other life forms like yeast, etc., this way it's called SIR2, SIR2. And these genes, they stimulate the enzymes so that you can continue life. You will increase the development of the cells. And those cells, it's like hand in glove, is stimulated by an enzyme called telomerase. As we get older, or you bite into the non-production of telomerase, telomerase becomes less and less in the cell, thus the cells don't divide as much. But as you're stimulating I'm going to say it, you bought into the death gene so that you don't express your longevity gene, then your telomerase goes down, and thus you die. Or you have the example of metastasization in cancer. But as you go past that, you do stimulate the telomerase. And from the foods that have high in telomerase are, in particular, I've done a lot of work because I got involved with telomerase studying the earthworm as being the official toxicologist for the earthworm in the studies done in Puerto Rico for EPA and Orange County. The thing is that the foods that have high amounts of telomerase are the anthracins, which are like zinnia plants, the mulberry, elderberry, strawberry, blackberry, allspice, cinnamon. They have high amounts of alpha-lipoic acid, too. The other thing is that, like in our Grandmaster, we have, which is important because anyone who eats figs, they have less wrinkles, is figs, persimmons, blueberries, natural minerals like copper, selenium, magnesium that are in these foods all play a part in the abundance of what is needed. Boysenberries, apricots, dates, crab apples, pomegranates, allspice. All of these, when you mix them together, makes a blend so that then your body can absorb those nutrients, especially if you want to go past and give the food so that you don't make the other proteins, as we discussed earlier in the show, the ice proteins, so that you don't stop that process. You freeze it up. You want to go beyond that. And but the key with any of this, no matter what supplement you take, the more natural is the ideal. Reduced, nanoparticles in it or anything like that. But the thing is, the more you take of those, you definitely, as it was brought out on the first half of the show, you definitely have to have a cleanse, because otherwise it's just pancake batter. You're trying to get these nutrients in, and it's not going to work. Once you have that batter gone and cleaned, your body will absorb these nutrients. It will stimulate the memory of those genes, and then it can be expressed. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could take these and express your true self and your true light within? Everyone sees, like when you have a pregnant lady, you see the radiance, like they're just glowing, Some people say they see their aura, et cetera, this way. But you see that. It's because they're giving off their radiant heat, their light, okay? And the more you give off, the more life you have, because that mother who's carrying the baby is creating the life within them. It's creation at its physical form.
Yes, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, agreed. As a father of 5 children, I absolutely agree. And I think it's one step beyond that as well. It's not only that aura, if we're going to call it that, of the mother glowing, but also of the child glowing on top of it, and it's a double aura in my book. So I see it every time. And by the way, Mikael is back with us. So you got 3 guests, Dr. Hilde.
I'm glad you could join us back. We're just starting the discussion on the longevity gene.
And may I pipe in here, Hilde?
Sure.
It gets back to that sticky business about what Antoine Béchamp discovered in the 1870s and called the microzyma. And actually, and I talk about the somatid of Gaston Naissance, who built this amazing, he was a great inventor, he built this amazing microscope, and he could watch the activities of the somatid. And then apparently, though, there were like 50 other scientists who saw this, what Béchamp called, and I have the paper, it's called blood and its third anatomical element, a triad, actually, very interesting. I just find it so interesting in that certainly DNA, and mind you, I'm not a scientist, I'm a painter, I'm an artist, but I do think and I do read about very fascinating things. And the somatid, it's these dancing charged particles that are indestructible, actually are immortal in a sense, but go through all sorts of chameleonic changes to do different functions. And I think right there is a study that someone should take on, the relationship between the somatid and DNA.
Right, and their spin, as it was brought out earlier, meaning if you have that correct spin and you're in balance with everything happens in a good way, or is what we perceive to be good. And knowing, but I definitely think that's all part of the physical form just before you go into the energy fields of, as I like to call it, the God particle. But I definitely agree with you.
Well, and as Béchamp was very firm in his research papers, he said, the only thing that survives the host, whether it be a plant, an animal, or a human, at death, is the microzyma, or as Naissance would call it, the somatid. There is no genetic material. There is no enzymes. There are no how shall I say? Well, DNA makes proteins, right, out of amino acids. All that's gone. But the one thing that survives it is the somatid. I just find it highly intriguing, and I'm merely excuse me, I'm an amateur at this, but God, what a great field of research that would be, and if I find it odd that especially based on Naissance research, that hasn't been a huge research effort to find out, what is this thing, the somatid? Anyway.
Well, it's living light, Rick.
Does anyone else have any comments on it?
Michael, you're absolutely right. I've seen this under his microscope, filmed. And
it's living light. It's beyond just light, what we perceive a spectrum of light. It is living light, where it's light plus light in dimensions we don't even understand yet. And that's where we talk about auras, we talk about the glows, whatever. That is living light. That is that, or as the Christian church calls it, that's spirit, or whatever name we're going to put on it. I put living light. In '83, that's what I was told in my heart, and I felt it really strong. And it's way beyond the spectrum of light colors. It's beyond harmonics.
That's a very great point.
Right, and it's like Mikael brought out in the beginning of the show, the expansion of light, when you have infinite light cells, and then you expand it.
Sorry, guys, that was my phone. I did that.
Okay. We won't hold it against you, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
And it's... with anything in development, the expression of, it's like I've always said, the genes basically, or the DNA is basically the book of your life, the book of your lineage.
It's like recorded there, yeah.
Yeah, it's recorded there. It's like our little textbook, okay?
But what sparks the book to create and follow its pattern? Correct.
And then what interferes with that pattern? Like we could have a beautiful textbook and turn around 20 pages were ripped out.
Mm-hmm.
That could have been our hidden knowledge or anything. And this is what happens. We also know that water, which is the water within our cells, have memory. And just as what we've quoted in the past, looking at the crystals of Dr. Emoto or any of these things, it has a memory, it has a resonance, et cetera, this way. But as everyone said on today's show, let's go beyond that to show what it is within yourself so that you can spin correctly and have the right particles perform into what you need to perform. And if you don't take care of yourself and you don't keep the pearl, which is your gift of health, and keep it in check, you've bitten into another whole different drama of life.
Yeah, and I once again, and that was very interesting that Michael mentioned that vis-a-vis the somatid, is that it is light. And I've seen the Nissan's, which I should send to both of you. They're fantastic. You see these dancing light particles, which, by the way, and as I've told you, I think maybe in the last show, he tried to destroy them with a massive amounts of heat, radiation, and even used a diamond cutting knife. I don't know how that was done, but they're indestructible because they're apparently will take physical form, will retract from physical form, but you can't get rid of them, which I find very interesting. And by the way, the conclusion of Antoine Béchamp, the first guy who viewed these things, he said, actually, all organic beings, all organic life is the result of the somatid, or in his words, the microzyma, turning mineral life into organic life. And at death, participating in the dismantling of that organ life and returning it to mineral life.
That's
very
dust
interesting.
to dust, ashes to ashes.
Exactly. And in one of Béchamp's paper, he said, now I understand what it means when you say dust to dust. Given my, my laboratory findings and my research. So,
right.
Very interesting.
And just using a simple comparison, meaning as we know with living cells or our body, when you could have all the nutrients, but if you don't have those trace minerals or those minerals that you need in your composition, you have wasting of the body, you have
interesting.
Disease, you have a lot of things happening with your body, but as you replace it, you have the regeneration of cells and vitality. And all salt, meaning like if we look at the living light of salt crystals within an ocean water, it's like the universal detoxifier.
Yeah.
Because everything goes into the ocean, whatever the pollution is goes into it, and then the ocean changes it all around. And I know we look at the environment, we clean it, we do all these things. But the thing is that it changes things itself. And those those salt crystals are like living, they're liquid crystals.
Yes.
In its most simplest form.
Well, and
the high-tech nano living crystal.
No, I think that's something that Mikael talks about, if you're still there, about crystal light and manifesting in our bodies and such. What do you think? What do you think, crystals? How does that apply with us?
Well, absolutely. I mean, when you think about how much we rely on crystal technology, we have tiny little chips that run, these cell phones and these laptops and the various other hardware devices, and then you look at the crystals. Basically, they're a higher expanded way of communication. So they're vibrating at a higher level, and so when we start to really look at the DNA level of our genes and start to activate the more crystalline nature instead of a carbon-based, more dualistic way, we're actually, I know you were talking a little bit earlier about junk DNA. Well, this whole two-strand theory that is based on allopathic, scientific, proof-oriented, evidence-oriented way of analyzing our cellular nature. There's, especially in the metaphysical circles, and what I share is that we have obviously more than two DNAs, and we have this ability by when we go into the process of regeneration and purification and cleansing and start to bring different techniques to infuse our cells with more light, we actually find that it's almost like a rippling into a lattice structure where we begin to form these crystalline aspects of DNA and start to reformulate this junk DNA, because it's not junk. It's actually just part of the programming of death or separation consciousness. And, of course, this is my 2 cents with all of this.
Well, excuse me, Mikael, this is Rick. I didn't get to meet you in the first hour. I want to introduce myself.
Hey, aloha, Rick. How's it going?
Aloha. Well, I made this point before you came back on the air, that I think it's kind of a weird form of propaganda to call certain DNA junk DNA. It's like, it's there for a reason, I would think.
Absolutely. It's not junk. They just want us to think it's junk, so we just label it as junk, when in fact it's the particles that make up our communication with source consciousness, or the God particle, as Hildy had mentioned earlier. This is all how we actually formulate the different aspects of our 6 sheaths, which I talked about earlier, different layers of our bodies, so they all get in alignment. So they're all communicating with each other to a much more expanded, fullest potential of who we really are. See, that's the problem, is that we have been allowing ourselves and accepting ourselves as a much more lower vibrational imprint of who we really are. And so what happens is we're constantly being miscommunicated, and we're miscommunicating. And there's like things where, we constantly can be grand central, and all the different communication can happen at all time, but it's like you're getting connected all the time to different beings that are actually just limiting you to one way of communicating. It's like one TV station. So when we start to look at crystal energy, what I would offer is that once we start to replicate and start to align that junk DNA into, a much more expanded potential of our DNA, whether that's 12, 24 strand, where we start to open up to levels of not just using 15% of our brain, but at 100%, we actually start to open up all communication levels. And
very
that
interesting.
Our body affect all of our bodies, the subtle ones as well as the gross one. And that's sort of the main way that I facilitate the work that I do in my seminars and workshops and trainings, is to help people to get to the root. And then once you get to the root, you realize that, wow, I can seed my consciousness from a whole nother level and create my own belief system and create my own way of expanding my communication, not only intracellular, but also, with the whole cosmos. And then it becomes this where all communication lines are open, and all your cells are communicating faster, and you're also communicating with the universe faster, so information, regeneration, rejuvenation, all these words I'm using to describe what happens when everything goes online.
Well, look at the way our galaxy, it spirals like DNA. Am I correct?
Right. Exactly.
Right, and it explodes within itself.
It's not one strand. It's not 2 strands of the galaxy.
Yeah. So that was my comment. I beg your pardon?
I was just offering how many strands does a galaxy have? I mean, when you go to the root of a galaxy and you go into, more looking at astronomy, basic astronomy, I mean, it's not just 2 strands that are rotating around each other. I mean, we have multiple strands.
I would also add this, that, we're always told that, well, there's 4 dimensions. Oh, no, now there's 6 dimensions. How about there's an infinite number of dimensions?
There you go.
How about that they are in that you can't count how many dimensions. Why limit it? And of course, in my mind, I'm always thinking, well, that's a good posit that there's 5 dimensions. Whoa, aren't we getting risque here, It's a great way to contain people's thinking. Why should there be any? There should be infinite, countless number of dimensions, and very likely there are.
I don't think it is.
Real quick, you have a little bit of an echo and delay, so we're talking on top of each other, so I just want to let you all know that. And I know that Dr. Hildy was trying to say something, and, we couldn't hear. Okay. So just remember, there's a delay in there, and especially with Mikael out in Hawaii, so actually Maui.
Okay. Thanks for bringing us home, Michael.
No.
Yeah, well, somebody's got to direct the choir.
Yeah, I think this is audience. I'm just going to say we're connected to Hawaii, to Los Angeles, to the Valley in California, and also in Florida. So, hey, we're making a cross right here in these connections. But I think it's wonderful communications. But also, I think when you have these open up and these alignments, just like you said, Miguel, that the thing is, the first stage, I think you would get more ESP or thoughts, or I thought this, and someone says it, and then you go beyond that type of connection, like your own wireless connection in thought.
Well, you think about how our thoughts determine our reality. So when our thoughts are only on, like you were talking about, dimensions, well, I could just relate it, like I'm sure many of you can relate to radio stations or TV stations, Like, oh, well, we only have 2 stations that you can tune into, and that's the only way that you can walkie-talkie or you can communicate or that you can receive and give energy, which, I mean, obviously if you talk to the Dish Network, they'll go, no, we have, 1,000 stations, but it's just that. It's like we have more than 1,000 dimensions. It's multidimensional. And so when we're communicating, this concept of communication of thoughts, when our thoughts are very limited, when they're based on a vibrational imprint that's lower than a certain frequency, then we stay within junk DNA. We stay as, that's just junk DNA, and we only have 2 strands, and if our thoughts go beyond that, well, they've told us it's junk DNA, therefore we can only communicate on 2 strands of consciousness. That's the only way to communicate. The fact is that's a lie. That's a complete, utter lie. When you look at it from a perspective of alignment with universal consciousness, we have multidimensional avenues and strands in which we can communicate. And our communication is determined by our vibrational imprint and quality and consistency of our well-being and our happiness.
That's
and
a
when
great
it feels
point.
good, we open up our intelligence, then we're not just communicating about very much 2-strand, 2 TV show, 2 radio ways of communicating. We start to open up communication that gets faster because there's more lines, it's more interesting, it's more connected. It makes us feel alive. It makes us feel that, wow, there's so much more here that I can give learn from and receive from, and then there's constant evolution. There's an evolution of our species. There's an evolution of our beingness, and then we become a lit-up cell wherever we go on the planet. We just light up. And then
Miguel, it's very interesting. You may not know this, but I'm an artist, okay, and I'm in a partnership on many things, with Hildegarde, and one of them are these custom portals, which I've done for several people, and they're abstract sort of. I'm being a painting doctor, okay, but I find in the course of doing these paintings, I'm breaking open into new dimensions, literally. Like I'm moving through new spaces and times, and some of these have been done for Hildy herself. And I guess the point I'm making is that even art partakes of this, like, numberless dimensions, the whole concept of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I come from a background of sound. I mean, that was my Tibetan practice. My name was the Nawan Siring, which is the power of voice and speech and longevity of life, and basically sound and vibration and frequency of sound and its effect on the body and consciousness and, you know, the words we use to communicate and where before we say anything, what's the vibration that comes out of the words, and, of course, languaging. And so all these things are part of what I share and teach and and all the gold that I've hammered and drilled upon and seen if it's real gold for me, and that's what I share. And art and sound and, yeah, for me, this is all a part of the communication when our imaginal selves go online, because our cells online become one with the universe, and then it's just pure imagination. It's pure imaginification, and we start getting into this alignment of creation and co-creation, whether that's art, whether that's yoga, whether that's, you know, retreating and cleansing the body, purifying the body, whether that's eating good food and making good food and creating, using color and paint. I also work with color therapy. All these things help us to align and create this imaginal body that then is completely, by its very vibrational nature, ascended. Okay, we talk about this ascension. Well, we're creating the ascension by completely aligning with our imaginal selves and allowing our imaginal selves to communicate multidimensionally, so we're not limited to one-way walkie-talkies, that we actually can use these other forms, tools. That's all they are. Language is a tool. Your brush with the paint is a tool. The sounds that we make are tools. The music that we make are tools. They're all tools, but they're tools to access languaging and communication. And that's what opens up our true geometry in the crystal aspects of our subcellular, subatomic way, very primordial nature. The very nature of being a human being is complete, open imagination as the key to empowerment, to eternal life. And
you know, that is so. And am I pronouncing your name right, Miguel?
No, it's Mikael.
Oh, Mikael.
Mikael, yeah.
Oh, that would be the Russian Mikael.
Yeah. Mikael, yeah. Well, it's actually Michael.
Oh, Michael, yeah.
Yeah, that's also German, so that fits.
But, you know...
I mispronounce it, so I'm getting the right tones, you know.
It's your fault. It's all your fault.
All I have to say is aloha.
I guess I was the only one who got it right the first time.
Mikael, yeah. But, you know, it's very interesting, and Hildy and Michael knows about the work of my friend and Hildy's friend, Dr. Joseph P. Farrell, and he's brought up this whole notion of or hinted at it, of what's called a topological, as in topology, a topological descent. And I hope I'm, presenting him correctly, or maybe I just spun this idea out, where you have higher orders of information that come down in a topological descent and become physical stuff. And by reverse, you could have a topological ascent. So it's like two-way traffic, at all times.
Right. Yeah. Well, that reminds me of actually Dr. Vernon Wolf, who a lot of work that I really respect with the holographic universe and working with holograms. He talks about the imaginal cells as these tiny little particles that actually the roots of trees, they are communicating on a trillion different levels with other trees. And the way they communicate is when they meet each other, they actually merge into one being. They're actually having sex. They're making love. And they're making love at like trillion, like all the time. And as these roots start to communicate with other roots, and this also then reminds me of also the movie Avatar, when the doctor, I can't remember, Sigourney Weaver plays, and she starts to explain to these guys who are, trying to get the unobtainium, like this whole forest is alive. It's one neural system that's multidimensional, and all these trees are communicating. And so in the movie Avatar, and also where I first heard this concept with Vernon Wolf, is that we're not even realizing, but just outside our door, the entire earth and all the trees, these huge trees, especially in the forest and just even in the cities, there's a whole underground network beyond the concrete where they're communicating and stabilizing a frequency of ecstatic bliss and constantly making love in order to sustain life, so that life stays in the spiral and stays in the spin and stays eternal. I think that's really fascinating, and obviously that concept.
Oh yeah.
The Avatar, where these I want to say neutrinos. I can't remember the exact name right now that he was calling these particles, but that this is happening all around us, and we're just, sometimes we're so locked in we don't realize that this infinite, amazing, expanded, juicy connections are happening all around us at all times. There's constant communication, and all we have to do is really be able to listen. That's part of our work here, is to drop what we're doing and really get into a state and vibrational place where we can listen to what's really going on.
I would call it like a divine commotion that's constantly going on. It's never settled, but yet it has, and this, again, as an artist, has been always one of my driving themes, as Hildy will tell you, that there is, as T.S. Eliot called it, the still point in the turning world. But there's stillness, but there's commotion. There's a kind of like eternal stillness, but which provides for this unbelievable activity and dimensions and commotion.
Oh, yeah.
And we call it the now.
There you go. There you go. No, that sums it all up. Absolutely perfect. It is the now.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly is. And we're in it right now.
We're in it now. Yeah, we got a meteor and all sorts of funky things going on right now. So maybe that's why we lost you, Hildy.
Maybe.
Because you're
I
back
tell
on
you,
now.
I wrote down, when the light particles, as I said on other shows, as we get disconnected, what was the statement that we were saying or the topic? Because we're getting messages,
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's how it always works. Well, live radio is great because we find out live what the now is.
Hey, Mikael, some of your ideas are absolutely fascinating. I'm finding them highly interesting.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I mean, really, they really kind of like resonate and they harmonize with, or whatever you want to call it, with things I've thought about for years. And they're just really interesting.
Yeah, because your soul's recognizing the truth that he's stating.
Yeah.
The divine truth.
Imaginal cells on an expanded potential, and with all the listeners right now, we're connecting to the imaginal cells of the fullest potential of everyone online right now. So every time someone has some kind of feeling with the energy behind the words that we're all using to link in, we're linking in to this thing that maybe has been dormant or maybe has been discussed or maybe has been thought about briefly, and all of a sudden it's like everything in the universe is going, are we ready to go online? Are we ready to go online? We're ready. We're all ready to go online. So we're arcing over right now and creating this whole egg or bubble or field of an imaginal cell that's mutating and getting online and dividing and multiplying and creating this energy that is feeling good and feeling like, wow, some of the things that sparked from my childhood or from earlier in my life or whatever may have been put aside is now going back online.
Communicate each other.
Excuse me, Michael, and I'm sorry we got this overlap here, but I really like this word, imaginal. It's a very important word.
Absolutely.
I agree.
That's communicating on a even beyond a cellular, but even affecting cellular level. Just our words are the sound, And what we say, how we say it, can affect so many in an instant.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's what needs to happen right now. We're in the moment of the now, and this now is the perfect now. It wasn't able in the past nows, and it's not looking to future now. It's right now. What's going to go online is going to spark a whole nother expansion out of junk DNA, and all junk DNA is just DNA that hasn't aligned.
Woo, hang on, it's going to be a wild ride.
Oh, yeah.
When it's aligned and it aligns, oh, my God, I mean, the universe is not even the limit. You know, we've got the metaverse. I mean, so it's like, where are we at and where do we want to go?
And we have the dark hole, which is not really dark. It's dark according to our limited understanding of light, but dark holes are light.
Black holes, that's, black holes. That's another brother of mine, Nassim Haramain, who lives here, does amazing work with the Resonance Project. That's his whole theory of black holes, is the tube torus, and that black holes are actually infinite spectrums of light.
Yeah,
so,
they're super light, as Dr. Tom Malusky calls it. Yeah, energy that we don't have scientific terms for.
Right, because we're only communicating on 2 DNA strands. We're only communicating with way talk radio, right?
Let's get the others.
Well, I'm going to go to 24 strands. I'll be communicating with the Cat's Eye Nebula very soon.
Get them all cranked up.
I'm serious.
Right.
Hey, Mikael.
All 4 of us. We're doubling our 2 strands right now. We've got
we're beyond. We're going to electrify it all.
Okay, Mikael, you have absolutely no choice. You will be appearing on this show many more times. I command it. You have no choice.
This is the preview.
Yeah, great, man. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah. It's been a very exciting time. I had no idea what was going to happen. I try to live in the I don't know more than ever before, so that I can be in the I now. And the more that I don't know, it leaves all this space to be communicated to, give and receive multidimensionally at all times, so that I'm not limited to my scope of communication. Because as soon as you limit your communication, for me, personally, I'm dead. That is death. And that communication is happening at the subatomic particle level, in my cellular mainframe, and grid inside, and as well as my communication with everything that we can visually see in the stars that surround us and into the infinite cosmos. So these concepts are, and really it's just, at this point, it's just helping people to unlearn what they know so that they can really be in the I don't know, so we can be free, be available to what really wants to happen instead of what people are feeding their experience of, that are creating darkness or creating black holes or creating destruction or creating fear and limitation. The fact is, enough of us go online, we're going to shift the whole paradigm. Because there's nothing outside of ourselves, And that's going to be the wealthy, happiest, healthy time possible.
I like it,
Right. So,
we're kind of running out of time.
Yeah, we have that music in the background. And audience, I want to thank our guest, and I want them all back again so we can have part 2 of this whole show again. Okay?
Absolutely.
God bless everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hildy.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. My pleasure.
Hildy. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Hildy.
You're welcome.
As always.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, aloha.
Informed, enlightened, alive and amplified. This is the Living Light Network.
Like a calcified callus, and then you can absorb the nutrients, etc. Thus, you cannot, audience, absorb the light or the triggering mechanisms of what is needed. In particular, with this, one is opening the body so that you have a good flow of energy, and one is, as we all know, in healthcare and spirituality or anything, live in the now, get rid of all the monkey chatter, which is the emotions, the physical, et cetera, this way. Because even physical diseases, say the top 10 diseases of the world, they all stimulate from an enzymatic process or a triggering of, I'm going to call it mutating or cutting off the nutrients that are needed to stimulate a gene to respond. In particular, with our today's discussion, Transcending the Death Gene, you're going to tell us how to do that, or, how it would be preparing your body for that, versus clinically they have proven that the death gene does exist, and it's activated with a mutation of the P16 protein that is in our body on certain chromosomes. But meaning if you cut that off, which is usually, as you stated when you were interviewed, like on about age 28, you make a conscious decision or subconscious, and then this gene can be measured at age 50, it starts to deteriorate. And University of North Carolina did big studies with rats on that. But what I find very interesting, Mikael, is that this particular protein, this gene, which is related to P16, also stimulates your carcinogenic tumor antigens to respond. So if you don't have enough of that gene or that mechanism to stimulate it, you could have metastasization of cancer, that way. And audience, bear with me. I'm just trying to paint the picture of the different diseases that are associated with you thinking in your mind that you're going to let this happen, okay?
Yeah.
Because ones who, have that drive and go beyond that do stimulate, which we're going to have on the second half, the longevity gene, because all of us are programmed for survival. Whether you use it or not, that's a different thing. But we do have that, so there is that internal drive. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that they have found, in particular, what we know with the disease called alateral sclerosis, which was Lou Gehrig's disease. Welcome to the One Cell, One Light radio show audience with Dr. Hildegarde Staninger, commonly known as Dr. Hildy. We have a very special treat for y'all today. Our show is going to be on Transcending the Death Gene. It's going to be done in two parts of actually activating the non-death gene, and then the other half is with the SERT and the telomerase, the secret of longevity. But my special guest, who has pioneered this through a spiritual means and also bonding earth and heaven together, is Mikael King of Divine Joy. He has pioneered and lectured throughout the world and done many different spiritual studies and taught lots of people in opening their heart chakra, and he's going to explain it all. Do we have Mikael there?
Yes, aloha. Aloha, everyone. Aloha, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you, Hildy. You know me a long time.
Yes.
And
we wanted to come in formally, and then we can get really, really informal.
Okay, great. And Chris from Creations by Chris, who knows you well, too, our Amber lady, she says hi.
Yeah, aloha. We say yes to the Amber jewel activation.
Yes.
Very, very much appreciated.
Yes.
Full appreciation for that. Blessings to her.
Thank you. Mikael, can you explain, because I know your background is diverse, and you are solid as a rock in what you do and what you express through your individual clients and group sessions, and also what you do for our planet. And that. But before we go into the Transcending the Death Gene, I think our audience just needs a little basics of where you're coming from, and then go into the Transcending the Death Gene, if you don't mind.
Sure. So, maybe I can start with just what I'm all about.
Yes.
First of all, I started this whole journey a little over 14 years ago, and basically was like everyone else, going into university, was in pre-med, had my whole life mapped out, and then I had a series of experiences that culminated into me actually having a death experience, drowning in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Francisco, and it turned out to be very much a shamanic death experience where I left my body and basically received these messages that if I continued in the way that I had been living up to 20 years at the time, that I would no longer be serving the awakening and activation of this planet and what Mother Earth is doing right now, of course, with all the changes that we're seeing right now in this moment all across the planet, economically, socially, spiritually, environmentally, so on and so forth. 14 and a half years ago, this was all happening for me very quickly, and I was given a choice to either come back and become one that's going to serve as a spiritual warrior to assist the Mother Earth and her children to come to this next step of evolution, or I would be part of the masses of unconsciousness and could leave the body. So it was actually a very deeply life-inducing, you could say, life-affirming experience. It went beyond death.
Right, I would say it would...
There is no death.
Right, I would say it turns your soul inside out in awakening.
Absolutely. And that point was the first time that I actually surrendered to something greater than myself, greater than my ego, my mind, saying this is how life is, this is the way it has to be done, this is my path, I'm going to go into the technical... My whole family is nurses and doctors, half of them are, and so that's kind of my background. So I kind of, even before starting med school and starting all of that, I got awakened way before that, and that led me into basically the last 13, 14 years of my life have been working with different shamans and sound healers and other forms of sort of New Age consciousness from both what we would term the New Age, is such a broad term, but those who are really dedicated, devoted to a path, in which I was for 3 years with Tibetan Buddhism, and had a Rinpoche, was back and forth from the East and the West, to leading that to travel the world to over 30 countries, working with different shamans, sound healers, different people of the past, from the indigenous to the cosmic, and also starting to connect in with my own source consciousness to assist people to come into what I had received and embodied as an activated human cell on Mother Earth.
It's a more calcified form of multiple sclerosis where you have paralyzation of the muscles, but in this you have the spinal cord and you can't talk, you get paralyzed, it paralyzes the muscles in your lungs. You can't breathe, etc. Number one chemical that does that is malathion and parathion, all of those organophosphate insecticides can chemically induce it. But what they have found is that this protein versus not the gene, Mikael, is that it is called ICE protein, which I find very interesting because it acts like Freon. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah.
Thus, maybe...
So it freezes it up.
Right,
yeah.
freezes it up.
Yeah.
So you don't have that whole internal process, et cetera, this way. But audience, they are making this through genetically modified proteins of using fish and other things to make your ice cream colder, et cetera, this way. So my question is, with many of these new compounds that are being added to foods, which I'm getting a little off the tangent, they may be actual components that may stimulate these genes to cut off so you age prematurely, you die prematurely, when you didn't even have a chance for your conscious reckoning of whether you're going to go beyond 28 or whatever you may be, you know?
Well, that's a great point, because I have to just add to that, and that is at the 28, which is a 7-year cycle times 4, you know, you're getting the 4 directions, you're getting to this point in your life where you're either living at the soul level or you're not. And that's where these things are happening to our foods and to our nutrients, mineral depletion, which isn't off the subject. I think it's actually right on, Hildy.
Oh, okay,
and basically what I'd like to just say is that at 28 there's a level of the Saturn which represents the authority in our lives of, are we aligned with the galaxy and the universe? Are we aligned with pure source consciousness? And you find that a lot of our lives, up to that point, many people go through crisis. They go through, wow, I'm actually not living at a soul level. I'm not living at where my dreams and my heart's, you know, in the deep recesses of my heart has been asking me for, you know, my entire life, or even as a child, going back to the creative aspects and the exploration, and really the part of us that forms that in the first 7 years, that really activates, if we're in a healthy environment, the imaginal cell. The imaginal cell, the childlike innocence, Gaia's body and within her body, which is really what I really share at the core, is through divine joy, really assisting people to understand what it means to be a sovereign, enlightened cell being, as we are all cells that are traveling and moving and loving and sleeping and dreaming and figuring out our lives, sorting out our lives on this, you know, third rock from the sun. So, yeah, I mean, that's in a real brief nutshell sort of the path that I've taken up to this point, to now serve humanity and serve this beautiful, amazing planet that we call home.
Right, and what you brought out was a beautiful, not just concept, but a comparison that even though our body is made up of 3 trillion or more cells, we are like an individual cell on this planet. And whether we want to consider ourselves the good cells, the bad cells, the evil cells, or whatever they may be, those energies, those forms of light and sound, and I'm referencing that type of communication because that type of communication is how our cells are triggered and they communicate or they divide within the body. Yes, you need the nutrients, you need all that. That's a given. But it's all a code. It's like the Morse code but with a little bit of light. And also, with my background in the far infrared, I know that to keep a soul intact or keep that life force within you that is your own configuration is what you've been ordained with, you know, from the beginning of time or however you are composed, that you need a certain amount of far infrared. Even though we don't see it as a photon, it is a certain vessel that holds this, because if you do not have a certain amount of far infrared to make 2 diphotons go together to make a single photon in your cell for energy, which is using ATP or any of that, you need 15 light photons, like little lights, like little candles. And if you don't have that, you're never going to have energy. If it's blocked, And a lot of things are blocking the aging process because one is contamination, having calcification, meaning there's new papers out now that if you have little molecules, even nanoparticles, it can stimulate the calcium within your body's cell membrane to come out trying to neutralize it, trying to encapsulate it. But then that makes a hard